NASCAR engines are the heart and soul of the sport, and they've come a long way since the early days. From the Hudson Twin H of the 1950s to the high-tech powerhouses of today, let's take a quick look at the evolution of NASCAR engines. NASCAR engines through the years. NASCAR engines have always been about power and innovation. In the early days, teams would modify stock engines to boost their performance. But as NASCAR grew in popularity, they had to set limits on engine size to keep things fair. In 1963 and 1972, they set the limit at 358 cubic inches, which is still standard today. As the years passed, NASCAR teams started getting more creative with their engine designs. They reinforced the engine blocks and main caps to handle the high RPMs, and they used cast iron heads with porting to improve performance. But these engines were prone to cracking, so they used ceramic sealers in the coolant systems to keep them in good shape. In 1990, NASCAR made a big change when Ford switched from traditional pushrod V8 engines to overhead camshaft designs with their modular V8 engines. This was a big shift in engine architecture, and it gave NASCAR a new level of power. Another major change came in 2012 when NASCAR switched from carburetors to electronic fuel injection engines. This allowed teams to control their fuel delivery more precisely, which improved efficiency and engine performance. EFI systems could also handle different racing conditions, which was a big advantage. NASCAR teams have used cutting-edge tech to boost engine performance. For example, data logging systems track various factors during races, giving teams valuable insights for better engine performance. NASCAR teams also use computer simulations to test new ideas and refine engine designs without building physical prototypes. And let's not forget the improved aerodynamic packages, which makes their cars super competitive. Today, standard NASCAR Cup Series engines can crank out an impressive 900 horsepower, showcasing the engineering advancements and technological integration. Despite the high power output, NASCAR regulations and the latest developments ensure these engines are reliable and can handle the demands of racing. Top NASCAR engines in history. NASCAR engines have come a long way since the early 50s. The Hudson Twin H was one of the early engines to dominate NASCAR races in the early 1950s. It was tough and built to withstand the abuse of racing. These engines were lightweight and had a low center of gravity. They came with flathead straight sixes, which were super reliable. The 308 cubic inch engine had twin H dual Carter carburetors, designed to raise the compression to 921. This resulted in a powerful hand-built factory engine that won many NASCAR races. In the 1960s, the Ford SOHC emerged to dominate NASCAR engines. It was a big step up from the earlier Hudson Twin H and was designed to compete with the Chrysler Hemi for the 1964 NASCAR season. The engine had 2 valves per cylinder and radical overhead cams with a 6-foot-long chain. These features gave the Ford engine over 600 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. The introduction of the engine sparked a thrilling competition between Hemi and SOHC engines, leading to race cars reaching incredible speeds on the track. Consequently, NASCAR had to ban the Ford engine. Despite this, Ford continued to develop the SOHC engine for drag racing. When it was finally allowed back on NASCAR tracks in 1966, it had to be equipped with a restrictive intake and weight handicap. In the 1970s and 1980s, NASCAR tracks were dominated by smoky Unix 366 big block Chevy. This impressive engine was created by destroying a 396 cubic inch engine, resulting in high RPMs and improved driving performance. The 366 cubic inch Chevrolet big block engine featured aluminum open chamber cylinder heads and a high compression ratio of 12:1, providing higher power output and efficiency. Moreover, it was equipped with a rare experimental GM intake manifold for even better performance. In the 1960s, Chevrolet engineers experimented with advanced cylinder head designs for their small block engines to dominate NASCAR races. They also developed single overhead cam aluminum heads mounted on a standard small block Chevy engine block. Although these SOHC small block engines never became mainstream, they represent a fascinating chapter in NASCAR history. NASCAR has had some wild engines throughout its history. One of the most interesting was the Dodge Cam-In block V8 engine. In 2003, the Penske team switched to Dodge engines for the NASCAR Cup Series. By 2011, this was the only team using Dodge engines, and in 2012, they won the Sprint Cup with this engine. Another engine in NASCAR's history is the 358-inch Toyota engine built by the Toyota Racing Development. It has a Holley EFI on top of it, especially now that NASCAR finally allowed engine injection. Under the injector, the TRD engine has 12-to-1 compression, 500 pound-feet of torque, and 725 horsepower at 9,000 RPM. NASCAR engines have some common features. The most important part of any NASCAR race car is the engine, which has to produce consistent power without any failures. NASCAR engines are similar to street car engines and your standard engine. Still, these racing engines are often made from custom-made race engine blocks. NASCAR race engines can produce up to 750 horsepower without turbochargers, superchargers, or other fancy components. But how do they do it? One reason NASCAR engines are so powerful is that they're big. The main requirement in NASCAR engines is a displacement of 358 cubic inches, which is about 5.8 liters. Most street cars don't have engines as big as this. Although NASCAR engines have crazy cam profiles, which open the intake valves early and keep them open longer, this lets more air into the cylinder for faster speeds. NASCAR teams usually tune and test the car's intake and exhaust so that it boosts at certain engine speeds. They also design NASCAR engines with low restriction, which means little resistance to gases and no mufflers or catalytic converters to slow down the exhaust. NASCAR cars have supercharged ignition systems that can adjust the spark timing and make them super powerful. These cars are designed to run at super high speeds and temperatures. NASCAR engines use unleaded gasoline with a high octane rating. They also have special camshaft designs with high lift camshafts and aggressive profiles. These parts are made with super tight tolerances to make the cars go fast and perform well. NASCAR has banned certain engine parts over the years to keep the competition fair. In 1957, they banned fuel-injected engines after Chevrolet introduced them to racing. They also banned superchargers because Ford had released supercharged engine options. In 1965, they made it a rule that all engines used in NASCAR events had to be available in production cars. This meant that the Chrysler 426 Hemi engine was banned because it wasn't offered in consumer models. This caused many Chrysler-backed teams to focus on drag racing instead. Chrysler eventually made the engine available in production models, but NASCAR still banned it from aero cars in the 1970s because of a 305 cubic inch displacement limit. Back in 1970, NASCAR put a stop to those wild aerodynamic cars like the Plymouth Superbird and Dodge Charger Daytona. They limited engine displacement and other rules because they were worried about super fast cars and the safety risks they posed. All those banned engines in NASCAR history show they've always tried to balance innovation with safety. NASCAR has seen millions of engines over the past decades, some of which have made cars win races and others that got them banned. What's the most interesting part to you about NASCAR's engine evolution? Let us know your thoughts about this new car. Don't forget to follow us and hit that subscribe button.